Welcome to the Inside Texas YouTube channel. Thank you for joining us on this Tuesday night live stream. Let me make sure I introduce everybody who's here. I'm Joe Cook, managing editor of Inside Texas. Above me, you see Eric Naleen, managing partner of Inside Texas. Up and to the right, there's Justin Wells, our senior recruiting reporter and team analyst. And of course, we got to introduce somebody new to the channel, to the Inside Texas community, Landon Holyfield of the Lando Show. He's been big on Twitter, covering both the Longhorns and the Cowboys, and on YouTube, all those different social media platforms. Landon, we're really glad to have you on, and thank you for being part of this Inside Texas YouTube channel.
Of course, man. It's honestly a pleasure to be here too. And you know, for those who don't really know anything about me, just real quick, real briefly, and then I'll pass it back to you, man. It's just I was a baseball player my whole life. I played in the professional ranks for a little bit. Chasing that big league dream. That's all I've ever known, really. That was my whole world. And then my daughter, Hagen, who is now about to be 2 years old, she was kind of introduced to the picture. We knew she was coming, and it seemed like the writing was on the wall for my baseball career to be done with. So I pretty much saw the writing on the wall. God was leading me into a different direction, and that door closed, and then the sports media world opened. And so it was basically, I've been a stay-at-home dad ever since my daughter came around, and that allowed me kind of just to pursue my second passion outside of baseball, which was my two favorite teams that you can see right here behind me. And so I did that relentlessly, the same way that I attacked baseball, and applied a lot of the same things that I learned during my playing days. Basically, it's just me versus me. As hard as I'm willing to work is as far as my career will take me. And so I took that by the horns, no pun intended. And yeah, man, it led me to this opportunity. So I've been a Texas fan my whole life. Wasn't good enough to play there, unfortunately. Or at least when it would have counted whenever I was 18 years old. I was a late bloomer. So like I said, this door opened. It's a pleasure to be here with y'all. And yeah, just going to continue hammering away at this thing, man. And the same way that I've done everything else in my life. So learning the ropes from you guys. It's going to be a good ride.
We're glad to have you. It's pretty funny. You got two Houston guys on this side and two Dallas guys on the other side, but all pretty we're all invested in the burnt orange. That's why we're here. That's why we're here to talk. And we're here to talk about the latest in Longhorns portal recruiting news. And guys, I don't mind starting it off. I put in an RPM on On3 for Matthew Golden earlier today to end up as a Longhorn. He entered the portal officially earlier today. Eric, I'm kind of curious. You got to see him a little bit at Klein Kane, and as he was playing with Jaden Blue back in high school. Just talk a little bit about the player that he is and all the different parts of the game that he can affect.
Yeah, he's like a kick returner instead of a punt returning version of Xavier Worthy. Extremely explosive, vertical threat, also a threat underneath in the screen game. He just needs a sliver of space, and he's gonna make a big play out of it. He's an electric athlete. They're trying to replace Worthy. It's hard to do, but Golden can at least approximate it. I'm not going to say he's exactly Worthy. He might be a little bit stronger after the catch. He's got that deep threat ability that really opens up Steve Sarkisian's offense. So he's a huge need. Obviously, you put in an RPM. We felt good about it. There's a lot of rumors behind the scene that he was feeling things out or having people do it for him. Obviously, Jaden Blue is in the program and had a good season. He's hearing good things from Jaden Blue. Got to like Texas's chances. Now, the big question to me, I already feel good about Golden. The big question to me is if they go after another receiver.
Yeah, that'll be after seeing maybe a couple different guys lose their eligibility. We already know that Isaiah Nayor is in the portal. Casey Kane's in the portal. Jordan Whittington's going to exhaust his eligibility. And, of course, Xavier Worthy very likely head into the NFL. You posted a little bit earlier today, Eric, on some of the guys who could, see themselves end up having to make a decision. One of the interesting ones was a guy like Adonai Mitchell, and I think Texas has a really good sell to any potential portal player at this point with Adonai Mitchell. This was a guy on the national championship team, two of them, in fact, and he came to Texas and ended up having his best season yet. So selling to someone like Golden, selling to any other receiver that enters the portal, that seems to be the place where or that seems to be a position that's available pretty regularly for teams to pursue in the portal. Justin, you know a little bit about the U of H offense and some of the guys who have been able to work with Matthew Golden, even Dana Holgerson. What do you think it would mean for Texas to be able to get a guy who comes from an in-state program, comes from Houston, and then, the Longhorns try to put him in the same place Adonai Mitchell was this past year?
I think it's, Eric wrote about this the other day. I think it's kind of a seamless fit. They need outside guys for this offense to work, to get vertical, to take care of some safeties. And Mitchell has been the quintessential pickup in that sense. Golden can do that with a little bit more speed. Obviously not the height or whatnot, but Golden can go. This is a kid that is versatile. He can do it in different directions. He played in Holgerson's offense at UH, and obviously he's not going to dabble in any of Willie Fritz's run stuff. But right now I think Golden's looking for – he's a fit. He's a guy that Texas looked at during recruiting. This was a guy Texas considered, taking during the recruitment. And so he only got better. And I think the one understatement with him is his kick return, punt return ability. That's a guy that can change things. Xavier Worthy became a weapon the second half of the season, in my opinion, when they put him back there for, consistently. Matthew Golden, to me, can fit right into there as well. You got it. It's just like an NFL roster. You got to stack talent, churn the bottom. That would be adding talent.
Yeah,
Lando,
I don't think Golden even had a punt return this year. I could be wrong. But he's got 2 touchdown returns as a kick returner, and some of those were not just straight speed. He was breaking tackles. He's got a little bit more power. He's the evidence of Worthy's power was that goal line play against Oklahoma State. Now he's not able to deliver on it as much if he weighed 15 more pounds. But Golden has that 15 extra pounds of muscle where he's going to power through some tackles. He's a heck of a pickup. The only question I said again is, do they go for somebody that has a little more experience as a proven number one as the go-to, like Adonai was moving the sticks for him this year. Jordan Whittington started to move the sticks for him a little bit later. I'm a little bit worried about them having a stick mover next season, but yeah, we'll see how it plays out. I tend to think they'll take a second receiver.
Lando, you watch a lot of football. You know how important the special teams aspect of it. But I guess from watching the past couple of years of Texas, they've had their difference maker at punt returner. They've had their difference maker with Xavier Worthy back there fielding punts. And they've had impact players like Rashawn Johnson and even Keelan Robinson back there taking kicks. But how important would it be for Jeff Banks to add someone as explosive as Golden who can do these different things in the return game that makes the third phase maybe even more dangerous than some of the other ones?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's vital, man. It's crucial, like you just said. The third phase. This is football. It's not black and white. There's three equal parts, right? It's 33%, and you've got to have all that as a blend. And with Xavier Worthy, you talked about Matthew Golden potentially replacing that. I mean, that's an All-American return man that you're losing, right? So to be able to have a guy like him with similar just explosive playability back there that can change field position for you and put your offense under Steve Sarkisian, who's operating just fluidly right now with Quinn Ewers in the quarterback position, just kind of keeping them on script, and just to constantly have short fields to deliver from. It makes this offensive attack alongside the plethora of talent, just playmakers, just that much more dangerous. So if you can strike quickly, the way that this team has proven that they can, to have that extra dynamic ability back there, it's everything. So yeah, field position and special teams, you cannot overstate the importance of.
Exactly. And we know, Jeff, if y'all, Eric, I know you go to a lot of games, and Justin, you've been to a few. Lando, I know you watch them pretty religiously, but you have never seen somebody celebrate a tackle on the 21-yard line like Jeff Banks. He gets as fired up for that as he does whenever Jatavian Sanders scores a touchdown. So it is pretty impressive to see that there's a player out there for him to pursue, along with Chris Jackson, Steve Sarkisian, of course, to really bolster the special teams unit. But Golden's the most recent portal addition that we have to be paying attention to, but there are a couple more that are really notable. Justin, you know a little bit about UTSA edge Trey Moore, who I think was from the San Antonio area.
Smithson Valley, Spring Branch. Yep.
From the San Antonio area, entered the portal last week. I think he was the American Conference Defensive Player of the Year, or an all-conference pick, if not that. And Texas has been a big part of his new portal recruitment now. What's kind of going on with Trey Moore, and what's some of the next stages with him?
The thing with Trey is Texas, was the assumption right off the bat. And it seemed even the UTSA beats were surprised, which, a lot of, this isn't new for Jeff Traylor. Every year they're losing somebody, just like Zahari Franklin last year to Ole Miss. People come and they take him. Trey Moore has been incredibly productive the last 2 seasons. And so it's not just Texas being the foundation. They've already, visited with each other. They took him to dinner. Anthony Hill Jr. hung out with him. He got to ask him questions. It's not just that. It's the teams coming in. Ohio State coming in for an in-home visit. Alabama coming in for an in-home visit. He's going to be at Ohio State this weekend for an official visit. And so I think Trey Moore to me is an example of trading up. And I think he's going to be a guy that is an immediate impact player. If Anthony Hill moves inside this spring, that gives Moore a chance to play some of that will or some of that edge. He's got some versatility. We're going to have a notebook on him in the next few days. Come to InsideTexas.com. It's a great time. And we're going to kind of lay that out a little bit better. But that's what tells you how good he is to me. It's the other schools coming on. Texas can always add a guy like that. But now that you have Nick Saban, Ryan Day, and some of these other guys involved, it's going to take some time to play out.
The thing is that you mentioned is you talk about Nick Saban. Yeah, he's going to have some great sells. He's got one already in Will Anderson and Dallas Turner. You talk about Ryan Day and Ohio State. Think of guys like Chase Young. But Texas is about to have some really good sells, I think, on the defensive line. It may not come to fruition in this draft, at least on the edge, but in future drafts, I think we're going to see him not only just, when you think of the 5 stars like Colin Simmons, but, even some other guys like you look at Anthony Hill being a versatile player. He's going to do really well as a will linebacker, but he's shown that he can do a lot of different things. And that versatility is, as someone who I know watches Dan Quinn's defense a lot, knows having versatile guys. I'm not calling him Micah Parsons. I'm not going to do that. I'm not claiming that. But you know that somebody who can do a little bit of everything and is not pigeonholed into one role, Landon, how important an effect that can have on a defense.
Well, just that, positionless football is happening right now before our very eyes at every level and on both sides of the ball. So it's a constant, pendulum effect, ebbs and flows, right? With offensive adjustments come defensive adjustments. And that's why you're seeing guys like Dan Quinn be at the forefront of innovation in that regard, just, having versatile guys that you can line up. You can go dime sets with safeties that can also play in the box. You can go nickel and have the same, cover, have your nickel backer, guys like Jaron Kearse cover side ends, and also go head up with a 220-pound bruiser. And the same thing, just like Wanye Thomas is another example. He's playing safety for you, playing nickel for you, doing all this types of stuff. So with offenses like Steve Sarkisian's, who can throw, personnel formations at you left and right and out of his back pocket all over the place, like defenses, it's tough to be able to sub in sometimes and match up. So you've got to just have guys that can do multiple things. And I think that's just the world that we're living in right now with college and professional football.
Eric, you always focus in on fit. I think that's the thing you value most when it comes to recruiting. It's how you when you did rankings in the past, it was probably the biggest weight on the scale. What do you see as a fit for Trey Moore if Texas is where he wants to be?
Yeah, fit and mental eval to co-equals in the evaluation to me. A lot of them have athleticism at that point, but what separates them is how they fit within the scheme and whether or not they're going to put in the work and maximize. And, what I like about Trey is he could play Buck or he could play Sam. He could play the jet bush position. He could play what Ethan Burke played this past season. Yeah. He's a pass rusher. And, you guys talking about positionless football. He's going to blitz from different angles. They can even play him off ball if they want, put him through the A-gap. He's a clear fit. What the staff is looking for is having as many versatile pieces as possible, getting them in practice and figuring out the best rotations, the best packages for them. The rest is all going to play out. As long as the guy can get after the quarterback, they're going to find a role for him.
And one of the things that allured, I think, me personally, but I think all of us, about Pete Kwiatkowski's system was about how he kind of hybridized some of the different positions.
They've had 6 foot, 290-pound defensive ends before. They don't. It's not always the same exact specific body type. They've had 6'5", 245-pound guys on the edge. They're going to figure it out. They're going to figure out what the guys can do, what they can't do. Then they're going to mix them and match them. And that's what they did this year. In previous years, they did not have the the amount of versatile athletes to do it. We're starting to see more of it. Next year, they're going to have even more of it. I mean, they get Trey Moore. If they get Trey Moore, you got Colin Simmons, you got Anthony Hill, you've got Burke, you've got Sorrell. It's just there's just a lot of different things. They have a lot of different skill sets.
We got a question from Hervin Antonio. Thank you for getting in those questions. Obviously, Andrew Mukuba is the real big portal target, at least in the secondary. We'll talk about him in just a second. But just outside of Mukuba, we definitely need another secondary guy from the portal. Any others that stand out? I don't know quite yet if there are some names that have come to fruition, but they're definitely, with the way the portal works, we'll find out pretty quick.
I think what fans tend to separate the portal from retaining your actual roster. I think retainment is going to be key here, because you can move a guy like Ryan Watts to safety or nickel, and then you can move Mukuba to safety or nickel. Again, it's like the guys on the front, they're going to figure it out. There's a chance that Ryan Watts comes back. We haven't talked about it enough. We've been talking about it a little more lately. That's something to watch. At the same time, more names will emerge. They're evaluating pretty much every safety that goes in is getting a heavy, thorough evaluation. There's a number of guys that are probably good enough to play at Texas next year, but maybe not somebody that really jumps off the page. They need a guy that's starter level to compete with Derek Williams and Michael Taft. I think Mukuba could play safety as a starter level, but they also like his versatility at star nickel. So give it a little bit more time. What I always tell readers on Inside Texas, and no fan likes to hear it, I don't like to hear it either, but patience is very important when it comes to portal recruiting. Because the second you take a guy, that's binding. That you're not going to dump them and take somebody else just because they came along and were better the next day. So you have to wait and make sure you get the right guy, and that he's most likely going to be the best you could get. If you go too early, a guy could come in the portal 2 days later and you're already burned.
One thing I always say, just because you say go get a portal guy doesn't mean that guy is in the portal. The guy that you want has to jump in, and that's part of the equation with recruiting. We got another question from Mick Biscuit. I'll send this to Justin. More worried about tight end than wide receiver. What do you think of that one, especially when you look at the way the room is? Depth is a little bit, maybe looking at 2024, you could lose Jatavian Sanders to the draft, depending on what he decides. After that, you still have Spencer Shannon and Will Randall, but Jeff Banks likes to make sure that room is stocked. Do you think the same way as Mick Biscuit?
Yeah, I'm a little more worried about tight end room. Not a whole lot, but after Sanders and Helm, there's kind of a drop. And there's a little bit more depth there, but you want some playmakers in that spot. You want those Jermichael Finley, Jermaine Gresham, those just big-time types that's like a Sanders that scare you, that really threaten your defense. And so the tight end room after Sanders and Helm's solid. He's been steady this year. You and I talked about on one of our shows about how, he was kind of underrated. I think that's why they're going to go big in 2025. It felt like they could do that in 2024. It sounds like Jordan Washington's probably going to be the only one, at least at this time. But, they're going to have to go big in 2025. They're Emory Winston, kid out of Calhoun, Georgia, 4-star. He's deciding next week. That's a 2025 kid right there between Texas, Ohio State, and Central Florida. If Texas lands him, I think that's a prime example of Banks kind of going big now in 2025. They still like Jack Van Dorslier, the tight end out of South Lake Carroll. That kid is, he's swimming. He's a big-time swimmer, and so we know that translates a lot of times. So, yeah, I'm a little more worried, and I think this class could have taken two tight ends, but this was always going to be a little bit smaller considering the last two cycles were a little bit larger. And so maybe it wasn't as much of a priority, but it sure seems like it's going to be in 2025. Winston announcing soon, which is going to be a big deal. Check it out at Inside Texas. And right now I'd say, yeah, I'm a little more worried about that. I'd be shocked if Sanders comes back, but we just don't know that yet.
I would too. Yeah.
I'm not ruling it out entirely. I'm sorry. I'm just hearing it in a couple different places. I know that he's I talked to some people that I trust on that know him well, and they say he's undecided. If he wins a national championship, he's definitely gone. But there's definitely some talk about him coming back. We'll see. Don't get your hopes up. That's more of a question for January 9th, hopefully January 9th and not January, 3rd? They play on the 2nd or the 1st. So, yeah, hopefully we're not talking about that on January 2nd. I'd let it play out. It seems to me sometimes you just have to default to the coaching staff. If they're not worried about it, you shouldn't be worried about it either.
Good point.
We can figure out that problem. Go ahead.
Don't mind. Sorry, Joe.
Go ahead.
Do you think my speculation would be I wonder if just the ankle injury when he was playing less than 100% for a good portion of this season, I wonder if that just kind of hurt the draft stock a little bit behind the scenes. And so that maybe could be where that potential decision to return for one more season to have a chance to go towards the top end of the first round potentially, or at least the top half. If I wonder if that's having any sort of impact as far as that decision is concerned.
I would think the number one issue would probably be blocking. Okay. But if you can make receiving plays as a tight end in the NFL, they're gonna let you get away with a little subpar blocking. They'll bring in some big oaf to do it for you.
For sure.
But I think he could improve his draft stock without a doubt. He could be a first rounder if he comes back. Just like Adonai Mitchell. There's so many wide receivers in this draft. I think they're predicting as many as 9 or 10 going in the first round. Obviously, that's not going to happen, but there's that many talents. If he came back, he'd be a top 10, probably a top 10 pick, top 15 pick. So, and I don't know that his family's necessarily hurting for cash like some draft picks would be. So we'll see. I don't know. I'm curious to see how it all plays out. But again, the staff is going to let you know when they have to reach. If they start taking bad players, and they probably had a poor plan. We haven't seen them take a bad player in a very long time. I'm going to let it play out.
Another thing with tight end, at least, is that it's an important part of Steve Sarkisian's offense, but specifically with Jatavian Sanders, man, that'd probably be the best developmental story that he could tell maybe on the trail. I mean, he's got Christian Jones, obviously, and there are obviously a few more maybe on the defensive side of the ball. But Jatavian Sanders, for a 5-star, he didn't have tight end skills. He had receiver skills. He was often a target of the Gronk fade at Denton Ryan with
split him out wide.
with Billy Bowman on the opposite side of him. But the reason he was on field goal team was because he was not, at least in 2021, trustable just on conventional downs to block and do all the responsibilities of the tight end position at Texas. So we talk about 5-stars, and oftentimes we kind of think 5-stars are just ready-made to come in and play right away. We've learned that across a number of positions that's not the case, and that Jatavian Sanders is a really good example of that. Gunnar Helm, I think, has shown that he can be when he needs to be, he can be a number one option, but they just got to add depth, like Jay the activist is saying. I don't think people are sleeping on him, but I think we just are admitting what JT Sanders is that he's a guy who, when you go a little bit past Brock Bowers at the top of the draft, who else is there by JT Sanders? I know there aren't very many names you would put in front of him, that's for sure. But a lot of it depends on, and Landon, you may be able to speak to this. It's a really good time to be a college football player now because you can kind of get paid to be a college football player.
Right. Well, that's what I was going to say is that if you're not at the top end of the first round, that signing bonus doesn't really differentiate much from what guys can potentially make in the NIL world now that we live in. It's the wild, wild west out there. And then just further elaborating too on JT and just the tight end position as well. You kind of touched on that being a difficult spot to translate from, like the jump from high school to college, but it's also a very significant jump from college to the pros as well, because the way I like to explain it to people who may not be familiar is that if, these guys, they're developing their receiver skills as tight ends, but then they're also an extension of the offensive line. So they've got to refine all this different, the blocking technique and pass pro, run blocking. There's a ton of nuance to that and just hand placement and leverage and all that type of stuff, man. It's a tough learning curve. And so that could be another thing, like Eric is saying, that's probably the leading factor that could contribute to him making a return potentially. Like, we can't close that door yet, but yes, it's the NIL world makes the decision a lot more difficult for guys now who otherwise would just say, look, this may be my only shot at fulfilling my dream. Well, now that there's generational wealth or generational money at the college ranks too. So decisions can be made, and that's what's like, expect the unexpected is the point.
I almost feel like the decisions are easier now, to be honest with you.
It's hard to pass up NFL money in that NFL contract, but it's
right.
becoming more difficult to. Got one more question we'll hit on the portal before we get to one. Actually, we got a couple more portal topics, but this one from Artemis Maximus. If Alfred Collins ends up declaring for the NFL draft, how many portal defensive linemen do you see Texas taking? And this is an interesting one because they assuredly need some depth there. They only took one in the last class with Sadir Mitchell. They've got a few, obviously, in the current class, Melvin Hills, Alex January. They've definitely added a few defensive tackles through recruiting. But could they, Eric, do you think they could look for a few more in the transfer portal if Alfred Collins does end up declaring?
Well, I think Alfred's going to get a very compelling speech from the staff. They're going to show him every last data point of why he should stay. They're not always going to do that. For some, they're not going to twist Jonathan Brooks' arm to come back. But for a guy like Alfred Collins, where it makes a lot of sense, you've got the proof of concept with Tavondre Sweat. Alfred Collins is well aware of that. Alfred Collins knows that he has a chance to beat Tavondre Sweat, a guy that comes back and competes for the Outland, that can end up in the first round. Tavondre is going to end up in the first round. I don't care where he's mocked right now. So he knows that there's a chance that he could be that guy, and the coaching staff is going to sell him on every possible angle for that. The problem with DLs is you're not going to find them a whole lot in the portal, not quality ones anyway. It's the same thing we talk about in high school recruiting. It's why I celebrate a guy like Alex January when a lot of people are just looking at his star rating. Those guys are just hard to find. Guys that are big that can move their feet are just not. They don't grow on trees. How many DLs? They definitely need someone that can play the run. That's the biggest thing they're losing with Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy. Byron's excellent playing the run. Alfred Collins, if he comes back, they can get after the passer. I feel good about Dre Bledsoe with another year. Vernon Broughton is probably the quickest off the ball out of all the defensive linemen. Yeah. He's going to have a very big year next year as far as playing that defensive end, 3-tech. But finding a space eater is a big deal. I think somebody was asking about the U of H guy earlier. I saw that on the side over here, Jamari Caldwell. Texas is definitely kicking the tires on him, but there's a lot to evaluate. I believe he was a JUCO kid. There's just a lot to go through. They're not, it's a whole lot different than, hey, he's in, let's take him. They're going to do their homework and make sure he's the right fit, not just athletically, but also culturally. So we'll see. But man, there's a high priority for defensive linemen. Those Aggie boys, they're going to eat this portal negotiation season.
That's why I think everybody, and I forgot to mention Dontre Robinson. That's the other defensive tackle they have committed. But
that's in this cycle, and he's probably going to play. But yeah, last year was Sadir Mitchell all by himself. They started moving on guys later. I thought they kind of took a little bit too long. They realized they were going after guys that didn't quite have the size they were looking for, and that's why Dontre Robinson, January were high priorities this season to kind of make up for that. But yeah, DeAndre is a stud. I had him as the second most important player in the class. He's a 3-star, but to me, you can't find guys like him. Colin Simmons was number 1. To me, DeAndre Robinson was number 2 as far as importance.
Big guys are always important. We got one more portal note to hit on. Andrew Mukuba. We talked about him a little bit in passing, but now it's time to focus on him. Austin LBJ product, went to Clemson for the past 3 years. First season was a great one under Brent Venables. The next 2, still quality, played a lot of star or the nickelback position this year for the Clemson Tigers. And Justin, do you think some of the hometown connections, whether it be, just being from Austin, maybe being familiar with Director of High School Relations, Jamal Fenner, maybe even talking to Jahdae Barron himself at that spot, do you think those are some aspects that are going to help Texas be enough to put them over the top, or who else will they have to fend off probably in order to maybe add Mukuba from the portal?
I mean, you nailed it. Like down to Jamal Fenner, down to familiarity with the area, being a local kid, him and Jahdae Barron being friends. All those guys know each other. They all hang out with each other. They are familiar with each other, growing up. But I think Oklahoma, that's the one you got to think about. I mean, Brent Venables was a guy that he had some success. I believe it was that once, he was there for that 1 year. And so that's one I think you got to pay attention to, because that I believe he felt like that was one of his better connections. But at the same time, there's a lot of things in Texas' favor. Doesn't mean that he's going to pick Texas. There's just a lot of things, and you name most of them. His opportunity to come in and play immediately is unbelievably important. They'll have Derek Williams and Michael Taft next year, but just his ability to play both those safety spots, but mainly his versatility at star, at nickel. That to me is why it's such it feels like a natural fit. Obviously, like you said, down the road, a lot of people that he knows each other, asking around, things of that sort. But he's gonna be smart. He's gonna listen to other schools' pitches. He was smart during his first go around in the recruitment, and I think he was pretty much stuck on Clemson. It felt like early on, and he kind of saw that way through. He's a pragmatic kid. You want that type of player in your program, and that's what I love Sark about what he does in the portal. He is judicious with these takes. You can be a physical and an emotional fit, but if you're not culture fit, he won't bring you in. He learned from a Jai Hall and Jaleel Billingsley. There haven't been two guys like that since. And I think that really shows that. And Mukuba is just, it makes a lot of sense right now.
And Landon, you talked about tight end. Sark's referred to it as being the second most important position in his offense. And I have a feeling that, a similar spot on the field on the defense, a player who has to defend the pass and defend the run pretty much on, you could do one on one snap, one on the other, is about as important in Pete Witkowski's defense. And Andrew Mukuba played a lot of star this year at Clemson and played a lot of slot corner. Some of it was rotating down, but a lot of it was just straight up coverage. And having experience at that spot and who you're targeting has to help your prospects when trying to sell them a fit and a vision for next season.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think you pretty much summed it up there, but it's, if you can erase like having a tight end eraser, that's a lot of time the advantage of having a pass catching bigger body like that. Somebody like Brock Bowers or Tavion Sanders is their mismatches, because when you put them in line, you've got a linebacker body out line up in front of them. Then all you have to do is motion them out. And then it's like, okay, you got this linebacker that's a downhill player. Now he's in space trying to turn and run with a legit, pass catcher, somebody like JT. So it speaks to, if the more guys that you have on your team in today's football, college and pro, like I said, that can play in the box and also cover, it's a cheat code.
And Eric, I'm going to harp on it again. Mental eval and fit. Seems like Andrew Mukuba is, from what we remember in his recruitment, even going to a program like Clemson and the way he's handling this transfer portal process, seems like he's someone who gets that and would understand it at his next place.
Yeah, that was kind of part of what I thought, when gave Texas the chance the first time, was I thought he felt comfortable around the other players. Justin alluded to that. He kind of fits with the other guys that end up at Texas. Now, it was a different coaching staff at the time, one that, didn't do themselves any favors in the recruitment.
Great.
But he definitely felt comfortable with his classmates that were going there. And, sometimes we meet these kids and you're like, oh, that's a Texas kid. And other times we're like, ooh, I'm not so sure. They're going to have to work a little harder for this one. Mukuba felt like a Texas kid, but one that, Texas didn't do a great job of recruiting.
A lot of different portal news going on. Inside Texas, definitely the place to be. We'll be able to keep you up to date on new targets and if there are any new interests. But it's time to move on with recruiting. And I like where Derek M's mind is at, because that's where I wanted to start at first. Xavier Filsaime, a Florida commit right now, 5-star out of McKinney. Our friends over at Gators Online, the On3 Florida site, said that Austin Anderson, maybe Billy Napier, and their new defensive backs coach would be in home with Filsaime tonight, or at least today. This is one where Texas is trying to get him on campus, should be getting him on campus this upcoming weekend. Eric, for someone who was just offered ahead of heading to the Cotton Bowl and the Red River Shootout, what does it say that Texas has been able to make up so much ground? It says a lot about Texas, says a lot about Florida, but I'm wondering what it says about the Longhorns.
Yeah, just a point of clarification. I saw that question, so I reached out to a buddy of mine at Florida. I think that visit's tomorrow.
Okay.
That's what with the new DB. I haven't confirmed that, but this guy knows Florida like the back of his hand. So we'll see. We'll definitely try to get some intel out of that. The offer late is not always a sign that, it could be a sign that you had a plan all along and you were waiting for the right time. They felt like offering right before the Red River Shootout was the time to do it, get them not on campus, but at a very spirited event. That place was wild. Even though Texas came up short, I think anybody that was at that game that had some interest in Texas thought that they fared well, and you could see yourself in that uniform. I think there's some things that we're going to learn about this recruitment down the road. Like, maybe they had been working on it a whole lot longer than anybody realized, or that he and Wardell Mack had been talking maybe about a flip when nobody else was really paying attention to it. I go back to hearing that, Texas expected 2 flips in October, and, a couple days later, I think it was Wardell Mack, I forget exactly what day. And from then I started thinking that, man, things were looking really good with Xavier. I think it's just a better situation for him. Florida is, not trending well, and Texas is trending in the opposite direction. being back in Florida close to his mother, I think was always a little bit overblown. He's been here for a few years. It doesn't take long to become a Texas kid. So I think that the staff probably had a plan that we'll have to learn a little bit more down the road. I don't think it was incompetency that took him so long to offer.
And we kind of know what Florida fans may be going through right now. I think in the middle of the last decade, we had a lot of experience with the exact same thing Florida seems to be going through.
Well, this coach going in to make the last-ditch effort, you could see these fans getting excited, like maybe he's going to be the game changer. Yeah, I know I've been on the other side of that. I don't think that's going to work. I put in a prediction in for Xavier on Saturday, and I feel like it was probably 2 weeks too late. But
How's the guy from East Texas going to say his name correctly? Xavier Filsaime. Filsaime. That's how you do it. How am I going to be the one that says that correctly? This is new and different. I like it.
You are on the recruiting beat, but yeah, we saw that, and the previous experiences didn't even have the portal, and we know how much freshman saviors aren't really big time saviors. But Landon, just going into the SEC, finding an opponent and targeting their top recruit, one of their top recruits in the class, if not one of the top defensive recruits in the class, especially after the Longhorns already went and flipped Wardell Mack. What does it say about Texas and Steve Sarkisian that he remains just so adamant and consistent in trying to go after their top targets and not having to settle elsewhere on the trail?
I mean, it just speaks to the character that he operates under, man. And I think there's been numerous different examples of that. Like the Xavier Worthy situation is one that comes to mind, right? Just maintaining and developing relationships, not burning any bridges. And teams are starting to pay attention, players across the country now and across the board are paying attention to what's going on at Texas. And Steve Sarkisian, he's got a great reputation now, and it shows. And I think this is just yet another example of that manifesting itself to the point to where people are seriously paying very close attention to what's going on.
We've got another big recruitment with an SEC opponent, a longtime opponent. This one is Ty Anthony Smith, a linebacker out of Jasper High School. And Eric, Texas is looking to make it back-to-back years to flip a very coveted linebacker prospect. How important is he, not just in that sense, but also in that Texas doesn't have any other linebackers committed in this class?
Yeah, I don't know, man. Stealing from A&M right now is robbing from the blind. I don't think it says a whole lot in that regard. The funny thing about this was Texas has been making up ground for a long time, much more privately than people realize. When everybody was writing them off, I remember I was going through my notes last night, and I sent Justin a text on November 29th saying, "Hey, Texas is still in this thing, even though the public posture was they were out." Now they have had a lot to overcome in the Jasper area. There's a not so subtle push towards College Station with recruits there. But they do need a player. And what I like about this is, somebody asked early up the stream, I saw the question, who does he compare to? To me, it reminds me a lot of Jalen Ford. He's got a lot more length than you realize. He's a box linebacker more so than anything, but he can move pretty well laterally. He's going to fill out to be quite big. He's 6'1.5", but he's a long 6'1.5", 6'2".
About 210.
210, but he's going to be 235 with no problem. You want guys that get to their weight with no problem, because then they're going to carry it well and keep their athleticism. To me, he's a very good player, prospect. I really like Jalen Ford's tape coming out of high school. I was happy when Texas moved on him. You really liked stealing a guy from Utah. I think Ty Anthony was a really good evaluation from the staff, but just because he's from Jasper doesn't mean he doesn't profile well to UT. He's a bit different than I think a lot of kids in that area, and I think he's going to be. I think he will be if he flips. Will be a good culture fit for Texas. I think he fits well in that room with a lot of those other players.
And don't forget, when we saw him 3 weeks ago in the playoffs, I caught him over in Palestine, talked to him and the coaches after the game. He it wasn't just about Jeff Choate. Now, Jeff Choate was a big thing for him, but he was still talking to Texas. And I asked him, were there any other schools still coming at you, being an A&M commit? Because he used to be big on USC. He used to be hot and cold on a few other schools. And he said, no, it's just Texas. They're the one that's maintained it the whole way. And so that kid, He is really a sideline to sideline guy. I got to watch Justin Williams and Ty Anthony Smith in back-to-back and within a 3-week period, 2 best linebackers I've seen this year. That would be a tremendous flip.
Justin, I'm kind of curious. We know that Jeff Choate has taken the Nevada head coaching job, but he announced he's gonna stick with the team and finish the mission. Yeah. What do you think it says about Texas to where, even with some questions maybe for a recruit at linebacker, that he's still considering Texas and still really considering that program, even though the school he's currently committed to as a defensive head coach who has some good experience with coaching linebackers, especially even at Texas A&M.
Initially, the day Elko was announced, I caught up with Ty Anthony, and he loved that hire. He thought that was tremendous. He was full bore with it, and that's why I'd mentioned a post a little bit later about, hey man, it looks like A&M may just lock this one down after all. But like Eric said, he had kept hearing good things out of Austin. He kept hearing the positivity, behind the scenes, and it says everything, Joe, because what's the one thing he kept telling me over the last year that was the most important part of his recruitment? He wanted to play for an elite defense. And that's why I thought he was so enamored with A&M for a while, because they had brought in that amazing class a year and a half, two years ago, with all that front seven that was just looked like a mix of Alabama and Georgia kids, essentially. And I think he saw that, and the guys he built a really good relationship with Draylon Miller, who was one of his buddies, lives right down the road. Terry Bussey, a handful of those other guys. Well, Draylon decommitted, and Terry's also looking around. So I think the writing was on the wall, and I think he's this close to signing, and he just wants to make sure. And I'm telling you, if he gets on campus this weekend, that's where this thing is really going to take off. So with Choate not even being as involved, in Texas still getting that shot, to me, it says everything.
Yeah, Choate did a great job selling the school and laying the groundwork. So this question is why, does Texas still have a shot even with them not having a linebacker coach? Well, you got to understand, Choate laid a lot of groundwork on the school. The school does a lot of the selling itself. The history of the next year and the future of the school doesn't change just because Jeff Choate's not going to be there. So if you trust Steve Sarkisian to make a big hire or a good hire, not a whole lot has changed. Yeah, your relationship with Choate is gone. Steve Sarkisian usually does a good job of using other coaches to also recruit. But you got to look at it the other side. Look how much is left from A&M. Do they even have a linebacker coach right now? Did they get a defensive coordinator yet? I missed it. I've been so busy the last couple of days. I don't think they
just got a strength and conditioning coach today.
So Texas is not at a disadvantage in that regard. So that's inconsequential. And I'm telling you this: the visit was always going to happen. It was going to happen. The problem was that they were still in the playoffs. They got knocked out by my Belleville Brahmas. That was part of the timing issue. But the visit was going to happen.
One of the big three, and there are more than three, but those are three real big ones that we wanted to talk about on this show tonight. There are a lot of defensive line targets still out there. A lot of even maybe a look at receiver. Including in that defensive line. This will be the last thing we touch on about recruiting before we start moving on a little bit more. AJ Bell, word on Dominic McKinley. Where does Texas stand? And if you saw, On3 had a report earlier today that Dominic McKinley, a 5-star from Acadiana, would not sign in the early signing period. I think would wait till February. Someone that Texas recruited with pretty good effort over the course of the first, until he committed, but eventually chose A&M. But now it seems like Texas is maybe trying to put their foot back in the door for a prospect with a pretty high ceiling, but he's got a lot of ground to cover to climb up to it. Eric, is that something that you see being one that we're going to really have to pay attention to over the next couple months? Or do you think maybe that's one that the portal could be, where our focus is shift to instead?
I lost my train of thought. That question said Aggie boards are saying DJ. That threw me all off. Some of these questions are slaying me, man.
I'll take McKinley right now.
What McKinley is, that one's going to start all over. Just start.
You think so?
Yeah. Well, I mean, A&M is probably still in a good spot, but they lost.
Oklahoma's got some vibes there today too. They like it.
He likes Oklahoma. I'm selling on Texas's chances a little bit because I think he's one of those guys that prefers a smaller environment, like we were talking about. Some guy, that's a Texas kid. Other guys, you're like, oh, I'm not so sure, and they're going to have to sell this a different way. So when I say it's going to start all over, I don't necessarily mean that Texas is going to be in the driver's seat or anything. But yeah, I don't know. To me, that guy's vibe is a little bit less outgoing than what you see at a lot of guys at Texas. He's a little bit more laid back, smaller environment sort of guy. Good dude. Don't get me wrong. I'm just not sure that he's I don't know that if he's destined for Texas.
Justin, what you got on this recruitment of the South Louisiana?
Eric nailed it. This is one I caught up with his brother. He's got a younger brother, a couple of years younger, that's also going to be a highly rated prospect, Darius McKinley. And I asked him about just a little bit about, are you expecting Texas coming in on Friday? And they said, look, they still talk to those guys. And so Sark's still swinging. And so you have to trust that, and you have to trust this process here and what PK wants. And they're not forgetting they're entering the SEC next summer, and these guys, it starts on the line of scrimmage. And so it's you wouldn't turn down that type of kid. You would stay in the mix. How to what extent? I think we're going to learn that. That's what we're going to figure out. He's going to be one of those guys that waits. Like Ryan Williams, the receiver out of Saraland, reclassifies, and now he's going to wait till February. He's going to be the hottest girl at the prom for the next 2 months. And so it'll be interesting to see how it turns out.
Hey, maybe he ends up going to Syracuse, because it seems like there's a College Station to Western New York pipeline at this point being built by the Texas A&M interim head coach and
January
future defensive coordinator for the Orange. We got a question earlier about is Paul going to be on the channel? Of course, that's Paul Wadlington, also known as Scipio Tex. I think I pronounced that right. And Eric, I'll let you speak to that. And it's exciting news to share.
Well, I wouldn't say it's exciting news. It's exciting for him. He's in Cabo right now. Yeah, Paul's on vacation, and we've had a lot going on. Paul and I go back, probably 13, 14 years now. Of course, we're going to work something out. Paul's a tremendous talent. He's doing a lot of things that I've been telling him he should have done 10 years ago. I think he's a rare guy that has a face for YouTube, and he's quick on the draw. So, we're going to have to figure something out. Of course we will. Paul's an inside Texas guy, been there for a long time.
It'll be fun to have his perspectives. Of course, Ian's perspectives, Landon's perspective, Justin's, and Eric's.
We got to get back to Landon over there. We're going to have to ask a Cowboy question or something. What's up, Lando?
So I've got a pretty good one. I think we're going to shift topics a little bit. It's recruiting, but a little bit different stretch on it. Justin, you reported that Jordan Johnson-Rubel, a commit in the 2024 class out of IMG Academy, originally from Fort Worth. He and a number of other Texas commits, because of the way the college football playoff schedule is set up, could be able to not only enroll early, but practice early with the team. I don't think they'll be able to suit up and wear a jersey come January 1st, but they'll be able to practice with the team. Alabama's been able to reap the benefit of this for the past, 10 years because, they keep making the college football playoff. Texas has finally made it. And while there's a lot of really good development that's available to them, they're learning how to practice before we get to March or February, whenever spring practices start. But Landon, I think that this says a lot in the fact that there are, some of these kids could be 17. Some of these kids could be 18. But they are so fired up about their commitment in the program that they are getting to campus early so they can learn the ropes and learn how to get prepared for life in the SEC and life as a Texas football player.
Yeah, Justin and I actually talked about this a little bit earlier too. I was curious about how that whole situation breaks down with the timing as far as being an early enrollee. But if you graduate early enough from some of these schools like IMG that you mentioned, you actually do have time with the bowl eligible roster to just get out there. And even if it's not doing anything physically, you're a fly on the wall. You're just being a sponge and absorbing all this different information, seeing how guys not only work, but how they prepare, get their bodies ready and activated for war out there, for lack of a better term. Right. And then starting just learning some of the lingo, developing relationships, just feeling comfortable with your soon to be home, like your newfound environment. Right. You've got to just getting a head start on all of that before you're just thrust into the fire. per se is a massive thing. Man, I've been in that situation myself, being a wide-eyed freshman, obviously a much smaller scale, starting off at a junior college, 8 hours away from my hometown of Fort Worth, Texas. But man, if I had a few extra months to prepare, and just for, you know, a coach or a friend or somebody that's in that room can kind of just, you know, kind of show me the ropes a little bit and take me under their wing, man, I would have been that much better off. But getting a head start on anything, just as a 17, 18-year-old kid, man, it's just invaluable time.
You know, we talk about enrolling early. This is like super enrolling early.
Super.
You know, this is way different because you get to learn. A lot of these guys, and Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, they get sent. I don't know if they get sent the whole playbook, but they get sent either a lot of it or enough that they need to know as a freshman. So not only are you putting that into practice, you're starting the muscle memory, but you're starting just to understand some of the demands that not only Steve Sarkisian, but the guy they spend maybe more time with from January to August, Torrey Becton, how he operates his program too.
Yep.
Yeah, he's going to get a head start. He's definitely going to know what to expect when he comes back in January. But I think we're all overthinking this a lot. You know, we're like talking about all the benefits that he has. Let's be honest, that guy's going to be hyped up to get all the gear. You know, they're going to the playoffs.
That's half the reason they picked the school.
He's going to get the bags. He's going to have that stuff that his classmates don't have, and he's going to have that on them for the rest of his life. So,
no doubt.
Yeah, there's a lot of benefits, but also he's joining at a very fun time.
It'll be all over his IG and Snapchat stories and all that.
He's active on that thing, and I think it takes a very mature kid to do this. And I think IMG Academy was a perfect place for a self-motivated, mature kid. We've had him on shows before. We've talked to him. He's done so many good things with us. This guy, Jordan's a great kid. But it reminded me of a story because Joe had mentioned, I don't know if they can pad up in the game. I don't think they can, but they can go through practice. And Jordan told me yesterday, you know, he has an in-home on Thursday with Sark and Blake Gideon, and he's going to ask him, hey, can I put on pads? Can I hit somebody in practice? Like, he wants to know how involved he can get. And I'm curious to find out the answer, to be honest with you. But it reminded me of 2004 Rose Bowl when Texas played Michigan. And I was in the airport coming back that next morning, and there was a kid in all this Texas gear decked out. I mean, you could tell this is an athlete, college athlete. And I walked over to him and said, I introduced myself. I said, what's your name? He said, Michael Houston. And I said, you play football at Texas? He goes, yeah, I just signed. And I knew recruiting at the time, and I knew the running back out of Colorado named Michael Houston. And I thought, wait a minute, you are already enrolled? You already signed? He's like, yeah, I'm enrolled. And I had never heard about it until then. He had all that gear decked out, Rose Bowl, this, that, Longhorn, that, everything. And that was the first time I thought about it when I was talking to Jordan. He's like, man, I want to try to get in the mix. And Eric's not wrong. It's about that gear. It's the best stuff. And it's not the stuff you get in the stores. They get different stuff.
Oh, yeah.
I was about to say, I looked on Nike the other day, and some of the stuff that playoff teams get is probably going to be under the tree of a lot of my friends for this upcoming Christmas.
Yes!
There is some really cool.
So excited, Joe.
Really cool stuff on the CFP. They have some special shoes as well, which are a little loud for my taste, but
those are tennis trainers.
I would wear them because why not? They're the CFP shoes. When are you going to get it? You don't know how often those opportunities
it's the last playoff. Remember, now they're expanding the last Final Four.
It'll be a lot of fun, and I'll get right on that, Tommy.
I was about to say, if you got any extras in a size 12, send them my way too.
I'll see what they hand out to us in New Orleans. So we'll finish this up a little bit with some team talk. We had Ian Boyd, who you should go check out on Inside Texas. He talked a little bit about how Washington fared last year against the Longhorns in the Alamo Bowl, and how maybe how the Longhorns may try to defend them again this year. But we had an old good friend of ours on the message board, Malays, say that it's going to be awesome. There are going to be a lot of points, and if you don't like defense, or if you like defense, this may not be the game for you. But between the two playoff matchups, I kind of view this one as the more exciting one, at least from an on-field perspective, because the other one, the Rose Bowl, probably seems like a game where it's what do the quarterbacks have to do. I think this one, it's what do the quarterbacks get to do? What different type of throws do they have to make? How many different ways do they attack the offense? I just think it's going to be a lot more exciting instead of, Michigan versus Alabama bully ball, just because you've got two coaching staffs who really love the passing game and like being able to pick up big chunk plays, and obviously some great quarterbacks, great receivers. Where, Landon, do you think that Texas really needs to pay attention to when it comes to this Washington passing attack? Do you think they should try to focus in on one receiver, one of the three that are really good, or do you think that they need to maybe just surrender some short passes and not get beat deep, kind of like they did last year and how Ian wrote about this morning?
Yeah, it's interesting, and I don't necessarily have a strong stance for my take on that yet. I would say though, we've seen it was frustrating at times for some Texas fans watching our DBs that we presently have just kind of not be up in the face of these other guys and bump and run coverage and just kind of being the athletes and reacting the way that they did when we recruited them, right? So I think that we saw them begin to implement that a little bit more down the stretch of the season. And so I would be kind of surprised if we didn't see that approach at least at the beginning to start this game. But I'm as far as like what is going to be the best, approach to that between those two styles, I'm really not sure. But
what I think they need to do is just, and Washington's probably going to help them do it, is make Washington one-dimensional. Washington's going to try to run the ball as a contrary constraint to the passing game, but that doesn't really work against Texas because they'll just devote more numbers to the passing game and stop the run with the front.
You can do it with four.
That makes it a lot more difficult. Texas has a much better chance of being two-dimensional in this game than Washington, and I think that's got a chance to be the story of the game.
You also think about some of the good pass defending players that Texas has. You have Jahdae Barron. Think you'll have Ryan Watts available, and if not, you have Malik Muhammad and Terrence Brooks, who have played some of their best football over the course of recent weeks. Derek Williams, that's going to be a tough one to figure out. That's going to be a first half problem that I think as we get closer to game time, we're going to really wonder what the Texas defense ability is going to be like with Jaron Thompson, Michael Taft, and then having to go to Keaton Crawford.
That's the value of the practice reports we offer on InsideTexas.com. It's not going to be a huge mystery to us what they're going to try to do.
Yep.
They'll figure it out. They have a huge advantage of having gone against these wide receivers last year. They know how fast they are. They know, so that tells you, what kind of cushion can I get away with? Yeah. What can I get away with? That familiarity is a huge advantage to Texas.
And one of the other things, Justin, I think you may have seen this too, is that there are a lot of returning characters in this game. We saw last year that Texas had, 10? The Longhorns brought 10 starters back from last year. And even in that game last year, they didn't even have Roschon Johnson or Bijan Johnson available. So you have basically most of the returning cast on offense. Switch out Cole Hudson with DJ Campbell, and you switch out Casey Kane with Adonai Mitchell, and you got everybody back in a year better. The defense, a lot of people come back as well. You don't have DeMarvion Overshone, but he didn't play that game either last year. Right. Washington obviously returned Michael Penix, returned their top three receivers, and I think returned a good chunk of their O-line. So it looks like this is a case where you're seeing two teams basically getting a rematch, and you don't get that very often in this day and age, and the stakes are going to be a lot higher.
You're not only getting a rematch, and like Eric said, the familiarity there, I think, benefits Texas a lot. And if you remember, last year was the time that Sark ripped the cover off the cover and let Ewers kind of go spread, go four out, go just chunk the ball. And he had his best game in a Texas uniform to that point in that game. I think that gave him confidence. I think they know they can go down, throw the ball downfield, and they didn't. They had an Xavier Worthy with a broken hand. They didn't have an Adonai Mitchell like you had mentioned. But that's the thing. The work to me, I think Texas scoring that's not a worry, even though Washington does have a good secondary. I think it's the other side. How much are they going to give up in the pass? Because you got three guys that are legitimate NFL receivers, and they've got, even their backups have been successful, have been productive. And so that, to me, because Penix, there's a stat I saw a couple days, maybe a week ago, where Washington has thrown the ball, chunk plays, chunk yardage, 20 yards and more, triple more than any other team in the country. Like they go for the throat. They go for the jugular, kind of like Sark did that first year or two whenever he had a guy that can do that. Just go early, chunk early on first down. Washington's going to do that. Michael Penix is a good quarterback, good release, gets rid of the ball. It's to me, that first half is going to be telling. But like Eric said, I think that them being similar, them having actual and a real rematch, I think gives Texas the advantage. They've seen kind of what Washington can do. Obviously, they're a year better and they're a year more confident. But I think Texas is too. And actually, Texas is better this year than the version they had last year.
Texas is way more complete than they are. I mean,
absolutely. More so than what? My point is more so than Washington has been more complete. I think Texas made a bigger jump since the last time they played than Washington did.
I think Eric summed it up well, though. It's going to be can Texas slow down their running game with 4? And that's going to be a huge deciding factor in the outcome of this one.
One other thing,
I think they can.
One other thing that's going to be pretty fun is that these offensive coordinators and these head coaches, they know how to scheme people up. And that's a benefit to Sark. That's a benefit to Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb. And I think this is, like I said, it's going to make this probably the most exciting playoff game of the two, and it should set up for a lot of fun. It's indoors. That's the other thing. It's not like you're going to get bad weather in LA on January 1st, but you're going to get no weather in New Orleans on January 1st in that Superdome, and that's probably going to help a lot of those guys out as well. Eric, I know you and Drew Kelson spoke the other day about recovery and how important that is, just to have a time to take a break, but can you tell people what the schedule kind of looks like, at least as far as return to practice? And I know Sark has kind of mentioned some of the details, but what else you might be able to offer about that?
Yeah, I mean, they've been relaxing. I wouldn't say relaxing, but relaxing compared to the rest of the season, just getting their bodies right the last couple of weeks. It's kind of like an extended bye week. They're back to practice on Friday, and they're going to ease into it. Don't expect them to go crazy. They'll have a couple lighter practices before they start getting into it. But I expect, even though they're not really, they're not going to be hitting each other all that much. There's going to be an intensity and a bounce in their step that's a lot like going into the OU game, more so than just going into your regular season game. So Justin and I are going to hit the phones on Thursday night. We're going to get a big update, and I think we're going to come back and do a show on Friday. I think is what Justin and I were talking about. We'll go into much more depth about what to expect over practice, maybe a little bit over what the scheduling looks like. Some of our early takeaways of what they really need to focus on going into the big playoff game. It's a very exciting time, and we've got, I can't believe it. They're going into the playoffs, and we spent most of the time talking about recruiting. It tells you how crazy it is right now.
And hey, to double down on that, Eric and I want to do that show, and I'm also going to be at AT&T Stadium. Inside Texas is going to be covering the state championships this week. We haven't even discussed that yet. We haven't even touched that yet. We're on portal. We're on NIL. We're on roster management. We're on recruiting this cycle. We're on an announcement for 2025 next week. We haven't even touched on it. There are some amazing games with some big-time Texas targets. I'll have a report on that at Inside Texas tomorrow. Be sure and check that out. Just recruits Texas is in on at the state championship. There is a dozen guys that you need to definitely know, and some commitments. Colin Simmons, Alex January looking for a repeat. You got, which would be humongous. You've got Freddie DuBose. He had a great comeback in his senior year, made it to the state title. I think that's awesome. So there's so much stuff we're going to have it going on here in the next few days, in the next few weeks. Hell.
Exciting time to be a Longhorn fan. Exciting time to subscribe to this channel. This is our first live stream. We're going to have a lot more. They're going to be awesome ways to get the best Longhorn discussion. Eric, Justin, always good to see y'all. And Landon, thank you for joining us. This has been awesome, and can't wait to see what you're able to do on this channel and what you bring. And we're excited to have you.
I'm excited to be here, guys. Thank you.
All right. For Inside Texas, I'm Joe Cook. For Eric Naleen, Justin Wells, Landon Holyfield, we'll see you next time. And thank you for watching.